I'm just going to do a quick recap of where we are in Curious George Goes to the Hospital. If you remember, he ate a piece of jigsaw puzzle, and the man with the yellow hat had to take him to the hospital, and they gave him an x-ray, and you look at the x-ray, there's the piece of the puzzle, and he would have to stay in the hospital a couple days to have an operation to take the piece out. And we stopped right where George was taken to the operating room and he fell asleep. And we were going to figure out what happened next. So are you ready? Here we go. When George woke up, he did not know what had happened. He did not even know where he was. Then he saw Nurse Carol. "It's all done, George," she said. "They got the piece out. In a day or two, you'll be running around again." The man had brought him a picture book, but George was sick and dizzy. His throat was hurting, too. He was not even curious about the new book. He closed his eyes again. "We'll let him sleep," said Nurse Carol. "The more he sleeps, the better." The next morning, George felt better. He even ate a dish of ice cream. Dr. Baker came in to see him, and the man, of course, came too. Betsy was watching him from time to time. She seemed a little less sad, but she still did not smile. Steve wheeled his go-kart over to George's bed. "Tomorrow I can get up and try to walk," he said. "Boy, I can't hardly wait." "I'll take you to the playroom now, George," Nurse Carol said the next morning. "And in the afternoon, your friend will come and take you home." The playroom was full of children. A lady was showing Betsy how to use finger paint. There were all sorts of things to play with, even a puppet theater. And that was just the thing for George. He had 4 hands so he could handle 4 puppets at the same time. George gave a real puppet show with a dragon, a clown, a bear, and a policeman. The children laughed and shouted, and even Betsy, for the first time, smiled a little. There was a TV set in the playroom and also a record player. George was curious, and he climbed and turned the switch. Would it go round and around like a merry-go-round? It did, and it started slowly, and then it went faster and faster, and whoopee! George lost his balance and was sailing through the air. Luckily, George landed on a soft cushion. The children cheered, and Betsy smiled again. George was so funny. But then the play lady picked George up. "That's enough for now," she said. "You'd better take a nap before lunch. We have a big day ahead of us. The mayor is coming to visit the hospital today, and later on you will be going home, George." When George woke up, Steve was just taking his first steps. A nurse was helping him, and the children were watching. The go-kart was standing there, empty. George was curious. He looked at it, and then he climbed into it. I wonder what he's going to do with it. Let's see. Then he grabbed the wheels, and then, while nobody was looking, he wheeled the go-kart right out of the room. George could make the go-kart go very fast. This was fun. Down the hall he went. By now, the nurse had noticed that he was gone and came running after him. "George, George," she shouted. But George was too excited to listen. He wheeled around the corner and down the ramp of the floor below, where some were busy pushing lunch carts and lots of doctors and nurses were showing the mayor around. What's going to happen? What's George going to do? Let's see. George tried to stop, but it was too late. Wham! The go-kart landed right in the middle of everything. Lunch carts tumbled. Spinach and scrambled eggs and strawberry jam were all over the floor. People fell over each other, and George was thrown out of the go-kart and landed right in the mayor's arms. What a mess it was. "You broke all my dishes," someone cried. "You ruined the go-kart," complained another. "What will the mayor think of it?" whispered someone else. And so it went. Suddenly everyone looked up and listened. From above came happy laughter, and there stood Betsy, laughing, laughing, and laughing. Then the children joined in. Then the mayor started laughing, and finally everybody just laughed. Everybody, that is, except George. Betsy came running down the ramp, threw her arms around George, and kissed him. "Don't be sad, George," she said. "The whole thing was so funny. I never laughed so much in my life. I'm so glad you were in the hospital with me." Now the director of the hospital spoke. "I am sorry this happened, Mr. Mayor," he said, "but I think we'll just clean up the mess and be done with it. George," he went on, "you've made a terrible mess, but you also made our sad little Betsy happy again, and that is more than any of us could have done. And now I see your friend has just come to take you home. So goodbye, George, and take good care of yourself." The children crowded around the windows waving goodbye when George and the man with the yellow hat were finally leaving the hospital. As the car was turning into the driveway, Nurse Carol came running after him. "Here's a little package for something that belongs to you, George," she said. "But don't open it before you get home." Right there. I wonder what's in the box. George was curious. Well, who would not be? The moment he reached home, he ripped the paper off, tore open the box, and there was the piece of the puzzle that caused all this trouble. "How nice of the doctor to save it for us," said the man with the yellow hat. "And now we can finish the puzzle." The end.